So, good morning for everybody here in the Chinese Academy of Science, Institute of Microbiology, for this dialogue of hLife magazine. Thank you so much, Professor Carlos, for being wake late in Brazil. It's 10 p.m. now in Brazil, and it's an honor to have you here, Professor, one more time in the Institute. I know you are a friend of the Institute, and we are expecting you in next month. And it's also we are very honored to have Professor Shen Yi from Fudan University that flew from Shanghai to talk with us here about the international cooperation. So let me just introduce myself. My name is André Lobato. I am a student here visiting PhD students of Professor George Gao, working basically on trying to make some policies and organizing the international cooperation of the Institute with Brazil. And in Brazil, I also do the same thing in the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation. That is the main research and development facility of the Brazilian Minister of Health. And today's title of this dialogue is Scientific International Cooperation, Challenges and Perspectives. And I will introduce you now to Professor Carlos. Professor Carlos is a Brazilian molecular biologist with decades of experience in multilateral organizations such as the WHO, the World Health Organization, and he has a life work in connecting basic science and product development with an emphasis on the global south. So in the emphasis is the diseases that affect the poor countries and the poor populations, and he's the director in the Center for Technology Development in Health in the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, and also a former president of this institution and academician of the Brazilian Academy of Sciences. Professor Shen Yi, or Yi Shen, if we do it in English, is a School of the International Relations and Public Affairs from the Fudan University, is the director of the International Research Institute of Global Cyberspace Governance, and at the BRICS Center Studies of the Fudan University in the Fudan Development Institute. His main research areas include international relations and cyberspace governance, information technology and international security, information technology, media diplomacy, national information security strategy, and great power relations. So I will start this dialogue asking to Professor Morel how he sees international cooperation. Like, why do countries cooperate with each other in science and technology? What are the most important mechanisms for cooperations? We have, for example, the World Health Organizations, we have binational treaties, and so on. So could you please share with us your vast experience and perspectives regarding international cooperation in science, technology, and specifically in health? What challenges do you see and which suggestions you could offer us to overcome those challenges?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very much honored to be part of this dialogue. And let me just start saying that I was really appreciating this small film that was displayed before we started about hLife. I think it is a pleasure to be part of this initiative, and very happy that hLife is progressing such a marvelous speed. In terms of international collaboration, I would say one of the most important things is, is to start bottom up, is to have good connections between scientists, between people, between principal investigators, students. It's much more important to have this contact, people to people, than starting by signing a big agreement that sometimes does not move on. I think the permanent collaborations, they start when you have good connection between people, between leaders in one, scientific leaders in one country and others. And of course, you have to have some kind of support for this to happen, either from international organization, but mostly from the country itself. A lot of my international collaboration was funded initially by Brazilian government. I had in the 70s, 80s, I had a very nice collaboration with the University of California in Los Angeles. And this started because I published some papers in Chagas disease and molecular diagnosis. This was of interest of some groups in UCLA. And then Brazil funded a partnership. In Brazil, it was funded by the National Research Council. In the United States, it was funded by the National Science Foundation. But it started with a scientist in Brazil being connected with scientists in the United States. Then we looked for funds, and we are happy to have funds from Brazil and from the United States. Um, when I was during 5 years, I was working at the World Health Organization, and I was running a program called the on tropical disease research and training, and we provided funds to start international collaborations. But we always looked to see how we could link groups in one country with groups in other countries. We started with seminars so that people would meet each other. Only when there was a good reception between scientists of two countries, then we would reach to upper level to involve to involve managers, to involve leaders, and to involve decision makers, to then start to solidify. But starting from the basis and moving up, I think this was something I learned in my career. Everything, when we tried to make, let us make a big agreement with that country, and a minister signed the other, in general, this has not the same probability of success compared when we started linking groups which are in the lab, which are working in one specific subject.
Uh, so, Professor Shen, by listening to what Professor Carlos has said, how do you see the international cooperation in science and technology, and do you see some changes, current changes? They are usually more south-north oriented, but Professor Carlos just mentioned the relevance of the national founding as a startup process uh, to begin the cooperation. So you can also feel free to do the comments by your own.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Ron and dear all. I think that Professor already mentioned very important mechanisms to push forward international cooperations on science and technologies. He named it bottom up. Actually, in the internet governance and the cyberspace governance mechanisms, we have this same process. But on the other side, you have to say that actually it's a two-track or how to say it's a two-level games. And the level one, it's the bottom-up process, which means the non-government institutions, even the scientist, individual cooperation is very important, providing some very important basement for the corporations. And actually, we name it in international relations theories, kind of like a constructive overfill effect. It implies those how to say those results that because we got launched in these individual joint corporations and technical corporations based on the institutions and the laboratories, so that the constructive effect will overfill to affect the government behaviors and the policy coordinations finally, which means you do the things in the bottom levels and then those effect level up to the upper levels. But on the other side, I think it's also very important to find out the government levels, how to say the top down, which means the policies, those politicians need to have a proper understanding to push forward these bilateral cooperations. And the most or extremely important is providing, how to say, a proper environment which is necessary for such kind of cooperations. Or sometimes we say when we focusing too much on geopolitical risk and the competition between the nation, you will find that those normal cooperations between the scientists and the institutions will be interrupted by some maybe political intervention. For example, we see that between China and the United States are very typical examples. That's when the United States side their internal understanding to China changes, and then the government will directly interrupt those bottom levels corporations, even those corporations mainly focusing on very pure scientific research programs, nothing related to geopolitical or sensitive technologies will affect those great power competitions.
So, Professor Carlos, I think you could listen to Professor Shen Yi from
Sure.
over there. So he just mentioned the two perspectives, the bottom up with a necessary constructive view of those on the ground, those on the laboratories, those doing research, and how they have to do some agency in searching for the building a proper space for cooperation. However, he also mentioned that top leaders they need to have a proper understanding of the creation of the necessary environments so that those that are interested in doing the cooperation can have the proper environment to do the cooperation. And he also mentions the questions of geopolitical risks and the idea of over highlighting geopolitical issues with basic research corporations that are not necessarily related with that. So, based on your vast experience in international cooperation, how do you see these two movements, the bottom up, and also how do you, maybe you could give some an example of how scientists can work to overcome possible challenges coming from a not necessarily very well sounded environment for international cooperation?
Yeah, I think that this dialogue has to take into account that, for instance, in Brazil, we, in these past decades, you see, Brazil, science in Brazil is something young. It's a young environment. The National Research Council of Brazil was created in 1950. And most of the funding agencies who came after that. And since 1950 to 2020, these 70 years, we had several ups and downs. We had governments that were backing science, that were funding science, governments that were not happy with what was happening in the universities. So, in some time, we had funds to do research. In other times, we had not so much funds. So, the Brazilian scientists, they had to accommodate this kind of changing political environment. That's why perhaps I put my first priority in bottom up. We sometimes, when there was a political crisis, we were fighting to protect our scientific contacts. If there was not a good chance in the government, okay, how do we survive without this help? So we in Brazil, we had to learn how to work under different situations. We had decades where science advanced a lot. We had decades where science was not advancing. It would depend too much. So that's why the question of stability, political stability, but also stability of management of some institutions. I think it's something very important to have good directors, good managers, and try to do serious work under any circumstance. When we deal with international cooperation, you have other kind of problems. Geopolitical problem is one. We in Brazil, we are very happy because we can collaborate with any country. Brazil is not seen as a bad country that we should not cooperate. I think we have this sort of track record that Brazilian scientists, they are welcome almost every part of the world. But on the other hand, there are some areas which are quite sensitive. It's not a secret that we are under the area of influence of the United States, and several times we are prohibited to get access to some sensitive technology. See? That's why this kind of geopolitical issues are very important. And we have to see how to move on. Health is a good area. Health is something that it's a priority in almost every country. But even in health, we have a lot of issues, particularly with these recent pandemics. You see that there were various governmental policies with this pandemic. Countries that were against using masks, countries which were pushing for vaccines, countries that were avoiding vaccines. So I think even in health, which is something that should be for interest for everybody, you have to live and you have to see how to navigate into this sort of different atmospheres. That's why since a decade, we are trying to push more and more international collaboration. In our institution, Fiocruz, we collaborate almost all over the world. We collaborate a lot with the Americas, Europe. China is something in arid health is more recent, but Brazil has a lot of collaboration with China, for instance, satellites. One of the most permanent agreements is between Brazil and China in terms of launching and monitoring satellites for several purposes. So there are areas where we have been very close to different countries. In terms, for instance, in biological sciences, the NIH is a big partner. The Institut Pasteur is another big partner. So we try to get a strong connection with the good international centers. And that's why recently I have been fascinated with the possibility that's being opening now with China. Since I was in China since 17, I have been traveling a lot to China, and I was very much impressed with this recent development, and particularly in the area where I'm working, in the area of molecular parasitology, molecular biology. And so I think there is this new area of international collaboration. Of course, there are a lot of problems. In terms of China, we have to build a conscience in the Brazilian students and researchers that, okay, it's not as easy. China is very much far away from Brazil. China speaks a language that sometimes only people like Andre, who is working, who now is good in Chinese learning. But there are, I see now very good opportunity for collaborating with China, and I'm pushing a lot for that. I think China and Brazil, we are two countries with a lot of common problems, a lot of common opportunities, and I think the problem is how to translate this into good connections and good productivity. But I do agree with all the positions that Professor mentioned, like the importance of government support. But the structure of Chinese science and Brazilian science is quite different. We don't have, like in China, an Academy of Science with so many institutes. Our Academy of Science is a different kind of, it's just, let's say, getting the excellent scientists to meet together. But the big institutions in Brazil are the universities, institutes like Fiocruz, or like the National Laboratory for Scientific Computing. But we are very much behind in terms of industrial science. What our industry does in science has no comparison of what the industry in science does in China. So, different world, but I'm speaking too much, sorry.
So Professor Morel just pointed out, I'm actually just repeating sometimes because I know we are all here communicating our second language. So just to help to emphasize the message.
Sure.
And so Professor Carlos just pointed out that there are typical areas where there are some restrictions to access of technology. However, health in general was a more like open area of cooperation. But the pandemic, instead of like bringing the world together, holding hands, as many could have thought in the past, actually proved that some contamination of geopolitical issues during the pandemic, from basic things like the use of masks to more sophisticated technological issues. So he pointed out that this division between health and other areas in science and technology cooperation become more blurred, not as distinguished as before. And he also mentioned the distance and the language. So the fact that we do not communicate in a language in which we are all fluent in. So this is also a form of barrier that needs to be overcome. And moreover, Professor also pointed out the different systems of science and technology. For example, in China, Chinese Academy of Sciences tends to concentrate and unite different institutes across the countries with also connections with universities. In Brazil, the Brazilian Academy of Science has not such a role, and this role is more concentrated in universities itself and few research centers like Fiocruz. And to the last pointing out is the difference of industries. Professor has pointed out that the industries in China are more developed in absorbing and bringing products to the market than the industries in Brazil. So this facilitates the development of science and technology in China. So after this summing up, I will ask Professor Shen Yi to bring his points up.
I think that Professor already providing a very general framework to understanding these scientific and technology cooperations among countries. I agree with him in several points. First, if we see that it will be more easy, frankly speaking, to launch these scientific joint cooperation, joint research and cooperation inside the global South countries. For example, it'd be more easy to launch such kind of cooperation between China and Brazil comparing to the cooperation between both China to United States and Brazil to United States. The first. And the second, already we have to understand that actually when we're talking about uh, the research or the scientific science and technologies, actually we not only focusing on the laboratory period of this research, actually we focusing on the policy or industry, the market period of this research, which these corporations, which means that we wish, for example, in the health areas, the scientific research could providing new solutions to countering the joint health challenges or the risk represented by this COVID-19 virus. And the first, and the second, we also have to focus on the public policies relating how to distribution these result of scientific research in the final phases. For example, how to distribute the vaccine more equally in among the different countries globally. That's very important. And third is I agree with Professor. We have different mechanisms to joint or organize this scientific research in different countries. But I think China and Brazil, our bilateral cooperations and our cooperations in the framework of under BRICS cooperation framework, providing a very good examples that even though we have different institutions to organize the scientists, organize the research, and organize our scientific research institutions, we still can have a very concrete and practical cooperations between our two countries.
So Professor Shen just pointed out a very interesting aspect that exactly due to some constraints in technological cooperation, this brings opportunities to southern countries and mentioned the space program So that's an area that's easier to cooperate between South and South countries, the global South countries and developing countries, exactly because they don't have the restraints they are both trying to develop their systems. And he also pointed out the example of the BRICS framework. I know that Professor Carlos has had some work with the BRICS, and he sometimes is asked to draft some general ideas for both Brazilian Minister of Health and Brazilian Minister of uh, Science and Technology and Foreign Affairs. So, which points could you make out about the BRICS countries? And also, I know that you also have experience with other countries. So, if you could point out some examples that you have in your personal history of the relevance on why people do international cooperation, and try to connect them with opportunities for the BRICS cooperation, for example.
Well, look, before that, I think there is something very relevant that what Professor said, and that is it's not only on, let's say, hard science or just technological science. We have to learn a lot on the area of health services. Brazil has a very interesting health system, which we call a unified health system, which unites the federal, the municipal, and the private sector in one comprehensive health system, which is quite unique. Our constitution, the Brazilian constitution, has a chapter on health. And it starts like that. Health is a right of the citizen and an obligation of the state. So this means that, in principle, anyone could go to a hospital, get treated for free. Of course, but this is a system that has different aspects. The private sector is also in this system, but it's a quite unique structured health system, which was also built bottom up. It was the only system that was started with some general conferences to bring people together to see what kind of system we want. And it was this organization which was critical to allow Brazil to survive some political leaders that try to destroy this kind of system. So I think having research on how to best organize the health system, how to best fund the health system, how to best train people in health system, it's as important as molecular biology, molecular parasitology, etc. So I think we have to have a very broad view, perhaps a one health view, to treat this like that. Speaking on BRICS, I think BRICS was a construction of an economist. But finally, it got its own life. And I think BRICS is quite important to change the how we organize this world organized in the last century. I think BRICS has such a potential and powerful influence, which I think I have always bet on BRICS as a success, not a success for next year, a success in the very long term. I think you have these countries, powerful countries, which have different histories, different trajectories, but they are united by common problems. And I think this is something very interesting. Again, when I was in Geneva working at the World Health Organization, I used to fund collaboration between the countries. I used to travel a lot. I used to travel to the rich countries to get money to fund projects in the poorest countries of the world. So it was a kind of Robin Hood, taking money from the rich to give to the poor. But so I could fund a lot of problems, a lot of projects in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia. In Asia, I was several times in Malaysia, in Thailand. In Africa, I visit a lot of countries in Africa, mostly because of malaria and tropical diseases. But we learn a lot how to collaborate on countries which have very different cultures. You see, something I really enjoy is having a team with international flavor. So I always try where I work to get people from different geographical origins, different cultural origins, different religious background. So I think when you have science as your goal, you have to be quite open. You can get good people in almost any place, any country, any culture. Uh, but of course, recently I'm very much fascinated with this opportunity between Brazil and China. I think we have we already signed several agreements between Brazil and China. And for instance, the first one we signed was with CDC, China CDC, and Fiocruz. And it was immediate to see common interests. Every time there was a threat of a pandemic, we exchanged phone calls. We decided which were the important findings, where we should pay attention. So it was quite interesting to see how our two countries have similar problems, similar opportunities, and similar challenges. So I think, again, I'm speaking only in Brazil, China, but I think BRICS is quite a nice platform for us to invest, for us to push for it, because the global south is something very important. We have to avoid this unified view that the north is going to find the solutions for health. No, we have to push ourselves a lot for that. I think each country knows where the problem is. Each country has to make a major contribution towards health problems. So I think I was very happy when André, as a PhD candidate, accepted to go and work for a bit in China under George Gao's mentorship. We need much more examples like that. I hope that the agreement that we signed recently when Lula visited China, that we can improve, that we can multiply by X times number of people that we exchange. I would love to have people studying China. I would love to have Chinese experts helping us here in Severa. So I think this, I hope to have a win-win partnership that would profit both countries. And hLife is going to be a nice instrument for that. I think hLife had a very nice start, and I see it as a very interesting instrument and mechanism for us to nurture science of the best quality. So I think this was, and that's why I think this dialogue for me was such important opportunity.
So Professor Carlos just invited you all to go to Brazil and do cooperation there. And I also want to let the audience know that we are not only very glad that you are here, but also if you have questions, they are most welcome. So if you can prepare some questions to ask the professors, maybe in 10 minutes, I will be very glad to read them to the professors, or if you want to ask them yourselves, you can use the microphone. So, Professor Shen, based on Carlos' commentaries, what you would like to point out as this dialogue?
I think that this dialogue is very helpful. And to these BRICS issues, the BRICS institutions is a very typical examples. At the very beginning, when Goldman Sachs created this term BRICS, the BRIC, the main purpose of it to sell the securities, because they organize the securities from four countries together and try to have special names for these special financial productions. It's very interesting that Goldman Sachs actually invited or introduced or created more than tens of such kind of names. They put dozens of organizations of different country names, but only BRICS become an international institution, de facto existence and independent. The Goldman Sachs cannot even control it because in 2014, the Goldman Sachs closed the BRICS security accounts because they sold out. This project is finished, but we still have these BRICS institutions. And yes, at the very beginning, the BRIC countries was organized representing to those uh, the fastest developing countries or new emerging markets, representing the emerging powers of the world. But nowadays, the BRICS institutions is far more than trade, economic, investment, financial corporations. They focus on global governance in a very general ways, and health governance or the cooperation on science technologies relating to different areas, including health, is the most important part of the BRICS. And the BRICS countries, just like Professor already mentioned, try to make their own contributions to make some constructive improvement of the global governance the systems running today because we still have lots of challenges, shortcomings. And the third, I think it's very maybe the most important to push forward the concrete either bilateral or multilateral cooperations, exchanges, and especially the exchanges of professors and students among the BRICS member states. Not only to make them have better understanding each other's, actually we need to build some new mechanisms to jointly sharing our research resources, our human resources, to join together our comparative advantages so that we can make some special contributions, not inside the BRICS countries, but to the global communities, especially on these science and technologies, joint corporations and joint projects. So,
Anyone has the question? So I just would like to be a little provocative and ask like why should people want to do international cooperation? Why should someone try to cooperate with another country and they still have to learn another language and travel a lot and face different cultures? Like, what is the relevance? I know that in health there is the issue of the samples and the variants and the biodiversity and the different diseases and the fact that they can be transmitted. But I just like to maybe ask the two professors to ask this question. Why?
Well, Andre, that's a very good question. And there are different reasons for collaboration. There are good reasons and there are bad reasons. Something which is very bad is what we call safari research. What is safari research? A rich country comes to a poor country interested only in blood samples, in getting patients. We make a comparison, say, safari research is when a country enters with disease and a rich country enters with technology. So I think this sort of safari research is very bad. Brazil and other countries suffered a lot with that. And it goes to very bad experience. For instance, clinical trials done in developing countries with not following the ethical proper guidelines. So, but let us forget this dark side of science. I think international collaboration is interesting in several ways. First, you share scientific knowledge. Every country needs additional knowledge. No country can do all aspects of science alone. So international collaboration is a very efficient way for you to get updated scientific knowledge. But also a very rich experience. When you go to another country, you go there to do scientific work, but then you live in another country, you get all this other cultural experience. You go and see other kind of organization, other kind of institutions. For instance, I was very happy when I started collaborating with California. I was seeing the first impact of internet in the American universities. I saw when the first personal computer was launched, I was there, the guys went to a shop to get the first PC. So these are experiences which are quite interesting. Once I did an international course in Cold Spring Harbor, and that was a fantastic experience. When you go and see how science can be strong in another place, how many things you need in your country. See? Well, every time I go to China, I am amazed of how China progressed in these last decades. And so this is, we go to study the colonial science, but we learn many other aspects. We learn about science organization, management, training experiences. But also sometimes we have a specific focused problem that some other group can give you the solution, or the technology, or the instrument for that. So I think there are several reasons to collaborate, a few bad reasons, but a lot of good reasons for you to collaborate.
Professor Shen.
I think your question is very provocative, and then I try to answer it shortly. I think the first you have to you have to cooperate because that's why human being exists in today. Because if you're talking about science and technologies, no single countries and no single institutions or no single super genius scientist can do all this research by himself, especially in today's world, because those research and the development of the technology of the research method is so complicated it cannot be singly completed doing all this necessary research, which is very important to the development of science and technology. So it have to cooperate with other countries. And the second is it has joint benefits because we know that from long history in human beings, people finally find out the cooperations among individuals, the cooperations among institutions, and the cooperation among different countries and states based on their comparative advantages is the best ways to jointly organize all these resources and stuff related to the either scientific research or market or even our individual lives. That's the way our the world coexistence. Actually, you have to different approaches in the world. Some people they try to conquer the whole world, try to transfer the whole world into single u- universe, a single empires, but it failed. And some countries believe, or some people believe, they can close doors, they can develop everything inside its countries, but finally it failed because the other countries doing comparative cooperation ways and launch these comparative advantages. And then in the competitions, those closed doors or self-isolated countries had, or these approaches has been defeated. And people then finally, actually, we have this joint common consensus. Maybe these joint corporations is the most efficient ways to doing everything in today's world, nearly everything. And last, of course, not the least, you can find out that such kind of corporations in different areas, they can spread and overfill. Uh, During these such kind of corporations, even those actors, they don't have very strong confidence toward each other at the beginnings. During this cooperation process, they can boost those confidence toward each others, and then such kind of corporations and the constructive result of these corporations can be overfilled to other fields, and then you will find that these corporations can boost by itself. But of course, such kind of cooperation is very fragile. We need to work together to providing a necessary environment to encourage the evolution and the development of such kind of cooperation very carefully.
So I guess that someone has a question now.
Hello, thank you very
India.
much. Hi, I'm Kieran. I'm with Professor Gall's lab. Thank you very much for attending this discussion today. Good evening to you, Professor Morel. Thank you for staying up so late. Um, my question is in relation to the recent pandemic we've all recently experienced. Of course, international cooperation at all levels was essential in overcoming many of the challenges and accelerating the research process. However, in-person collaboration was severely restricted. Do you see any unique aspects of in-person collaboration that online collaboration wasn't able to meet? And do you see any residual effects of the pandemic on future collaborations and the future of international cooperation? Thank you.
So, our student from the laboratory asked about the hybrid format, the in-person and the online differences, and if there is any uh, remains of the some of the difficulties of the lack of access between people-to-people communications, like face-to-face communications and online communications, and how would you distinguish them? If I properly understood your question. So, Professor Carlos.
Well, I think the pandemics change a lot the way we collaborate, the way we do meetings. And this did not change only during the pandemics. I think some transformations came to stay with us. For instance, uh, in my institution and the university where I teach, it's very obvious how the dynamics is completely different. For instance, we had a lot of problems to park our car before the pandemic in the uh, in the university where I teach in the Institute of Economics. Today, you find a lot of space to park because a lot of teaching is done by Zoom, is done not presential but virtual, and this is something that changed and it came to stay. Uh, on the other hand, this was interesting one point. For instance, at our institution, we had difficulty to find good auditoriums, good place to invite people to give lecture. Every time we had to see which auditorium, which place was free for us to book. Nowadays, when we do it by Zoom, we can have many more people, and we have no difficulties in get place because there is no need for a place. On the other hand, we lose a lot because I think presential in-person meetings, they are not replaceable. Uh, during the pandemics, we are forced to stay at home. We avoided meeting people. One of my son, he went to another city to have a place where he could stay far from everybody. Uh, but then when we came back, these new ways of meeting, Zoom, Teams, Google Docs, whatever, WeChat, I think they have now such an importance. For instance, how I could do this meeting today without this kind of virtual meeting? I think we have very nice opportunities, but they do not replace in-person meetings. You have to you cannot avoid long travels. You have to push for presential meetings, in-person meetings. I think if we manage properly, I think we get much more opportunities than before. But we should not see this as a complete substitute for in-person meetings. And that's why I'm so anxious to go to China in September, because since November 19, I do not travel to China. In fact, I was in China October, November 19, just before the pandemics. If I would stay 1 month more, I would be in the pandemics in China. But then everything more or less is stopping. See, we lost opportunities. Now we are slowly coming back, and we have to push for that. We have to push for travel, to meet people, to go to try to go to other labs, to collaborate, meet new partners, explore new opportunities.
Professor Shen.
He raised a very good examples on the challenges of the cooperation on science and technologies, especially relating to these health issues. You will find that, according to our experience in countering this pandemic, those face-to-face, people-to-people dialogue and communication is very important. But sometimes you have to sacrifice these things when you're countering some global risks. And the second, since we believe that we cannot cut off all these face-to-face and people-to-people communications and the dialogues, actually the real lesson we're learning from that is we should launch more effective global corporations to countering those global risks so that we can avoid a very tough dilemma of what to choose to how to say to choose a not that worse result from two very bad results, which means you have these corporations to keep these people-to-people dialogue communications under the risk of these these global risks, or either you just cut off it and very how to say just wait to the global risks to end. We need to finding a more proper ways to countering back these global risks so that we can shorten such kind of to level down our cost on these things. And the third, I highly agree that actually during these pandemic areas, we found that we actually develop a two-level, two-track of our lives. We can launch these corporations in the cyberspace with the help of these software and the infrastructures. And actually, on the other side, it's also very necessary to find out that we need to providing more infrastructures and more technologies which can help us to preparing for the maybe in certain times those when the uncertainties comes again that we will have more robust options to countering such kind of risks to ensure to enhance our cooperation simultaneously.
So I guess that we have to use the both methods, and nothing will replace the body communication, right? I guess that's making questions with the face and with the body movements. It's still something that the hybrid format, the online format, cannot replace. So if there is no more questions, maybe I could ask for do some final commentaries. So first of all, thank for all the people that who have come here, especially some friends from other institutes, and like for example, Professor Nuzia, Professor Song, and also to all the students that have come here to attend this dialogue. And I would also thank you, Professor Carlos and Professor Shenyi, and give you the opportunity to say your last words. Maybe Professor Carlos has some questions, although you're not here in presence to do with your body, but you can do with your voice to Professor Shenyi, and also if Professor Shenyi wants to do some commentaries. So, Professor Carlos, please.
No, just I was very happy to participate on this hLife dialogue. I'm so excited with this project of hLife, and after seeing all these posts and small film and new data about hLife, I think it's a very interesting challenge. I was so happy when I saw this launching. And so I was very happy to participate in this dialogue, exchange views with Professor Sheng. And I see this as a prologue of my next travel to China. I think this was a very nice opportunity. And I thank Andre for making this happen. And I thank hLife for providing this very interesting platform for dialogue and for uh, positive construction and partnership building.
Professor Shenyi.
It's my, I think it's my great pleasure to invite here to have this dialogue with the professor from Brazil. And also, I think it's very important to push for such kind of dialogues and communications among not only the scientist individual levels, but also among those institutional levels between the China and the Brazil, and especially among the BRICS countries. I think that maybe a small questions, or I like to have the comments from professors, is to which extent do you have any ideas which should be the next step inside the BRICS frameworks to push forward the scientist to scientist cooperations among all the BRICS member states so that we can provide a more friendly environment for the scientific or joint research cooperations inside the BRICS countries.
Did you get it clearly?
Yes, well, you see, I think BRICS is still a project in construction. I will hope that the BRIC system, the BRIC countries, would find ways to shape international collaboration programs. So we need funds for that. No country can do it alone. For instance, a Brazil-China partnership, if there would be under the BRICS umbrella some international funds to facilitate that, I think this would be very helpful because it's not so easy from the local funds to get funds for additional collaboration. It would be much better if under the BRICS umbrella, there would be new funding mechanisms for strengthening collaboration. I think just saying, well, each country puts its part, that's not easy. Each country has its budget already allocated to different things. So I would say the BRICS should have a mechanism, a funding mechanism to facilitate exchange between BRICS members states. I think this, we don't need so much money. It's not big money, but it's money with flexibility to allow visiting scientists, exchange of young postdocs, supporting a few programs. I think this would be nice if the BRICS organization, uh, perhaps we could press the present Brazilian president of BRICS, Dilma Rousseff, if she could put some money to facilitate cooperation exchange among the BRICS countries so that it would be a funding mechanism above the budget of the different BRICS countries. I think this would mean a lot of opportunities for us to travel between BRICS countries.
So this dialogue has had a bias, let's say this way, towards a Brazil and BRICS cooperation for obvious reasons, because we have a Brazilian speaker and a Chinese speaker. But we also had commentaries and perspectives regarding general views of cooperations, both between developing and developing countries, with different perspectives regarding them too. We also had professors' perspectives on the bottom up and down, and also Professor Carlos has pointed out how scientists should view the world beyond their own laboratories, and the need to do some, let's say, struggles and movements to keep their science working regardless of the circumstances of the period of time, maybe not a political good movement or maybe some international restraints, and that he encouraged scientists to keep up with the general and wider view of the circumstances. Also, Professor Carlos has invited students to think beyond only the laboratory level and to understand how the systems works. And also, Professor Shein has made the same points. And we have seen that the relevance of overcoming some challenges like language and the differences of industries and the systems. Also, I would like to thank Professor Shi and Professor Yanchun for organizing this seminar, and all the students that are here present. If anyone wants to make a final adjustment, it's you have like 10 seconds. Otherwise, Professor Carlos, I know that's very late in Brazil, and you you work like a teenager basically, right? Like a 20 years old guy, and also an inspiration for us all. And Professor Shen Yi will have offer a lecture after this dialogue in Chinese regarding some of the most important issues in science and technology cooperation today. That's the relationship between China and United States. So I thank you all for coming here. I don't know, Professor Shi, would you like to make something? No. So thank you all for coming here, and especially for Professor Shen Yi from flying from Shanghai to Beijing to attend this event. And as always, Professor Carlos is very awaited here in next month, September. So thank you all.